2026. I did say April 15th. Welcome back to the GFR, the Global Financial Reset, Surviving and Thriving the Transition. And joining me today in just a moment is retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox and Captain Rob Cunningham, retired. Joining us next week is Will Barney and Bill Armour. Now, for those of us struggling to get by with the little we may have, or those that have no financial assets to protect or invest, I address this because oftentimes folks are asking, should I watch the show? The answer is yes. The education in these episodes will benefit each and every one of us in some way or another. And very good news a bit down the line. Relief is coming to us all. So please do listen up. Where we go one, we go all. All right. Rob Cunningham, take a note. April 30th is joining us in our all-new Patriot Q&A Power Hour in our private Zoom room for 1 solid hour with the sole purpose of answering your questions. 1 hour. Join us. Visit jmcbroadcasting.com. Click on Premium Portal. Learn about that option. You can also, of course, subscribe for free and get all the other benefits. 99% of what we produce is free to the public. But please come and join Rob Cunningham for 1 solid hour, April 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern. All right, let's run this clip. Social last week. Now, it has music, but for some reason at the last minute, we've been, click that, thank you, been unable to play the music. But if you can envision, and please do look at the clip, this is 1929, New York City, published by our Commander-in-Chief a few days ago. And there's polite, fun, happy, upbeat, gentle music playing as we see Americans strolling the streets of New York. Note how well dressed they are and how more civilized they are as opposed to today. But that's not the message necessarily, though that is a message. But what happens, let's put it up so I can see the buffer. Keep that buffer on the bottom. Keep it playing. Now what you see happening, they were going about daily business in the streets of New York, and now they're what? They're lining up from the soup kitchen, for the bread lines. New York City, key word 1929. That is a very, very important message from our Commander-in-Chief, folks, and I'll let you connect the dots on that. Folks, it's time to prepare. Chaos without clarity and without direction and void of truth and void of real solutions must be avoided so that fear does not set in. That's not the image we need. Be careful who you follow. There's plenty of disruptors and opportunists out there. Now let's put up that image. After that talking point, Dan Scavino was telling us just a few days ago, there are many dedicated people in government who would leave tomorrow and earn tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a month as so-called influencers and on social media, but they choose to serve the American people instead. All while these so-called influencers talk shit all day long about and get big money for clicks and impressions. And Dan Scavino says, we see you. Very important messaging here, folks. Now, in addition to the truth bombs, you are about to hear from my highly qualified, esteemed guests, Colonel Lennox and Captain Cunningham. I will, at the conclusion of today's broadcast, share with you 5 very specific, proactive steps and resources for you to consider to not only survive, but thrive this danger zone that we are in the stage of this global financial reset that is indeed upon us. So be sure to watch this broadcast to the very end. Proactive action items and resources for you to explore. All right, full screen, President. There we go. He published this also. World's Most Powerful Reset, just a few days ago. President Donald J. Trump. Very important messaging. Let's talk about my book, Saving America and Protecting Your Wealth Are Not Spectator Sports. It requires effort and due diligence, then action on your part. Action changes things, and it is time. Visit Amazon.com and pick up a copy of my current book, 5-star rated, Global Financial Reset. All right, U.S. Army retired Thomas Lennox is a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel with extensive experience in logistics, finance, procurement, and large scale systems management across decades of military and Department of Defense service. As a Department of Defense highly qualified expert, senior executive service equivalent, he provided expertise in logistics, military finance, systems analysis, change management, risk management, and business process re engineering. He served as senior advisor for two major Army ERP systems with annual expenditures exceeding $1 billion. He conducted risk and deployment assessments for major Air Force and Army IT innovations. One Air Force logistics system was canceled based on his assessment. He also developed and implemented 15 end-to-end Department of Defense business processes. As a senior analyst and consultant, Tom Lennox authored the document that led to the creation of the Army Installation Management Command, contributed to U.S. Army change management plans, revised the Army budget process, and developed outsourcing and privatization strategies across Army and Air Force operations. He's the author and co-author of numerous papers that led to significant changes in U.S. Army management processes. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Lennox expanded bio and contact information can be found by visiting jamesebroadcasting.com. Click on contributors at the top of the navigation bar. Joining us also in just a few minutes, returning guest, retired Captain Rob Cunningham. KUWL is a passion launch in December of 2022. Born from a spirit of curiosity, Rob's thirst, truth, and disdain for false narratives, he questions, researches, analyzes, interviews, educates, and opines on many critically important issues of the day. KUWL is an acronym for knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and life, experienced to the fullest. Rob's purpose is to leverage his experiences, insights, discernment, and vast network of remarkable friends to bring you as much value as possible. Rob's personal background includes a business degree in management, information systems, United States Air Force active duty as an instructor pilot with combat experience and top secret security clearance, 2 years as major airline pilot before being furloughed, 20 years in investment and mortgage banking, and more than 20 years owning and supporting a national leadership and sales development company. I spent a few moments. Let's bring our two guests on, please. Three panel. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I spent a few moments briefly covering abbreviated versions of their incredible biographies so that you really listen up and know the value of these guests and their humble men that are before you. Thank you, sirs, for being here. Let's discuss dates. Typically, we don't discuss dates when it comes to forecasting the EBS or the this, that, or the other thing. I won't be going there with dates, but I'll be talking about some critical dates that I'd like our panel to weigh in on. Let's discuss, we'll go back, I guess it's 1969. We'll go back there for a moment. Let's discuss the moon landing. In 1969, President Richard Nixon picked up a landline and called our astronauts on the moon. We'll begin with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox. What are your views about that reported occurrence?
Well, I thought they did a good job out on the Nevada desert.
Okay.
Well, it's true. It was the Nevada desert. There's no way that you can have a camera on the moon taking pictures of guys coming off of a ship and feeding it live. Doesn't happen. That's my opinion.
Who's on the moon with the camera?
Yeah. Who was
Yes,
the guy that got to the
thank you.
moon first?
Yeah, Stanley Krubeck can be researched as well to our viewers and see what he had to say about the staging of the moon landing. But thank you, sir. Let's go to Rob Cunningham. Your opinions about the 1969 moon landing, the phone call from a landline, the things that Tom just referenced. What's your take? Did we land on the moon? Did it happen the way portrayed?
You know, you go back and you look at Operation Paperclip, and 18,000 of the friendliest people from Germany decided to get recruited and brought back over to work for NASA. And, you know, we didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have satellite phones. We didn't have high speed cameras. We didn't, you know, why would we have gone once and then not gone again like for 30 years? I mean, the idea, my only question is what precipitated the false narrative? Why were they doing it? Not why were they doing the show? It did not happen. In my opinion, it did not happen. You know, there's they didn't have a spaceless space car that drove around on the moon and they got back on the jet and then they took off from the moon again and they had come on. It does Lieutenant Colonel Tom is exactly correct. The technology, the timelines, the history, the story, the cameras being pre-positioned to watch the thing land. Come on. We've seen too many green screen setups where people are faking, weightlessness and the strings are attached to their arms, and it's a hot mess. Look, and we all know that we've been lied to about everything in this world since the doctor slapped all of us on our, you know, very mature rear ends, 60, 70, 80 years ago. Okay. If they've been lying to us for that long, there is nothing. If they will lie to us about the bioweapon, there is no moral red line these cretins will not cross.
Yes, thank you. My 2 cents on this, and certainly I want our viewers to do your own research. There's plenty of it out there. Lieutenant Colonel Lennox and Captain Rob just touched on some of them. You've also got the footprint that doesn't match the actual boot of the astronaut that was in the sand imprint. You've got Stanley Krubeck. I've seen the video clips of him talking, saying it was filmed. And just go Google around Buzz Aldridge and see what he has to say. But let's move forward then. And make your own decisions to our audience. April 1st, just a few weeks ago, April Fool's Day, we sent a rocket and astronauts to the moon. Or did we? What took place? What was the messaging here, Colonel Lennox?
The messaging that I get is that they were doing some kind of a spoof on a moon landing or a moon rocket. They, the four people on it, when you look at the pictures, you see one guy floating in space and you see one guy chewing on something and you see a third guy doing something else. And they talk, literally, they say that the movie is pretty good.
Get the
That's my
popcorn.
comment on that.
Okay. Rob, sir, would you care to weigh in on April 1st? I would just say maybe I missed it, but usually there'd been many months of a run up telling us that we're going to be doing this after all I didn't hear much media on it. And relatively out of nowhere, at least from my perspective, we're sending astronauts to orbit the moon again. What was the messaging here, if any, Captain Rob?
You know, A, we're in a spiritual war. B, we're in a narrative war. The intel drops have told us that symbolism will be their downfall. Well, we have to throw it back in their face as well. I think there was a lot of symbolism, kind of almost making fun of all of the compounded outer space rocket takeoff and landing missions. And it was somewhat of a parody. It quite frankly was when they took it off. If you look at the comms, if you read deeply, if you're an analytical person, it's almost as if there were many, to those that have pattern recognition, there were a lot of many offhanded, almost slapstick, sarcastic comments about when it took off, about when it landed, who was on it. Just to me, it's the Great Awakening is preparing the human mind and psyche to be able to handle and process the scope and scale of the lies and deceptions that we've lived with our entire life. I think this was just a little mini inoculation to I read to jump forward a little bit, I read a post of Dan Scavino or someone, maybe I'm not exactly sure who it was, that they had a very credible inside source that said on the 4th of July, President Trump will make announcements and make revelations to people on the 4th of July that will have the world never question the motives of what he's done and why he's done it the way he's done it when he lets the world know what he has to say on the 4th of July. So time will tell.
Well, we're all waiting, and as we're exploring dates, we began with 69 Nixon and that landing, which never happened. We moved on to April 1st of this year. Let's talk about April 2nd of this year, Liberation Day. Back to Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox. Why exactly was this called Liberation Day? What do you make of that statement?
You know, I'm really not sure what
No problem.
Liberation Day means, but I think he was
Mhm.
talking about the new republic being restored, and we're liberated from
Mhm.
the world that we lived in with the 1871 deal. It just, to me, it's one that went right by me.
Yeah, me too. There was the content put out on the socials by the administration, April 2nd, Liberation Day, and I was expecting, some big revelation, and I didn't really get one myself. Captain Rob, your views on April 2nd, Liberation Day?
Yeah, I read past the obvious as far as what was going on in Iran. I believe what we were liberated from. Well, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, who are our captors, and why is President Trump building a triumph arc? Triumph over who? You have to have a victory in order for there to be an arch for us to build as a monument. And if we won, who was our enemy? Who were we fighting? When he went in and basically in a day took out the entire Iranian leadership in the IRGC Council, and London showed their cards. They didn't help. They didn't send an aircraft carrier. The Lords of London canceled the insurance policies and spiked up the price of oil. Um, we are getting our liberation from the City of London and the Crown Corporation. And when he went in to take care of Iran, he showed the world who was financing the proxy boogeyman in the Middle East that had missiles pointed at 11 Middle Eastern nations. I do believe the Rothschilds, who domiciled themselves in the City of London and took credit for founding the nation state of Israel in 1947, were funding both sides of this never ending 47-year conflict between Israel and Iran to keep the world in fear. The Strait of Hormuz is not geography, it's leverage. They leveraged the choke point for 20 or 25% of the world's energy markets and paid for the red corner wrestler and the blue corner wrestler to always be 2 weeks away from nuclear Armageddon. They could keep the risk premiums high while Lloyd's of London insured everything. London got their slice of the money. And when Trump comes in and takes off the head of this proxy boogeyman, he exposed the City of London, Lloyd's of London, and the whole scam that has been kept the Middle East in disarray for at least 47 years. So, as far as I'm concerned, those that were looking at the chessboard appropriately, he forced London to show their true cards. And that's who we're going to be liberated from, the city of London bankers.
Thank you. We're going to jump into the Straits of Hormuz and ask some follow-up questions on that in a moment. Let's go to Tom Lennox, Colonel Lennox. Today's April 15th at the time of the recording here. The deep state assigned that as a tax day deadline for us all, and we've been living under the April 15th game for a long, long time. A day all Americans dread. Any comments about that date? Perhaps its origins, April 15th, And will this date matter in the near future? What can you share with us about April 15th?
I don't think it matters today. The first thing you can find in the regulations of the IRS is that the payment of taxes is voluntary because there's no law on the books that says you pay taxes. There's no amendment to the Constitution that says you pay taxes. The only thing that you have is an IRS located out of Puerto Rico as a private corporation that collects a bunch of money and sends it to the Rothschilds or to the Vatican, whichever one it's that turn it is that year. My opinion, if everybody stopped paying taxes tomorrow, there would be no problem because they've lost so many people in the IRS, they can't collect them. And the only way you have a contract is if you sign a 1040 form. That's your contract with the IRS to pay taxes. If you never sign a 1040 form, you have no taxes to pay. That's my comments on the IRS.
Thank you. Captain Rob, any views on April 15th? What does that date mean? What will it mean moving forward?
Well, as they said, and I mentioned in the previous discussion that comms will be their downfall. What happened on April the 15th, 1912? The Titanic was sunk, owned by the Morgans, were the three biggest critics of the Federal Reserve that did not want it and were blocking its passage. And 10 minutes before the unsinkable ship left shore, which wasn't even the Titanic, it was a damaged twin boat of the Morgans, Mr. Morgan had to get off the boat. And on the
How
15th,
about that?
they sunk it. They sunk it. How about that? And so, of all the dates, the new year, January the 1st, any date they could have picked, they just coincidentally picked April 15th. It's kind of like a middle finger because once they got their bank, once they convinced us to, sure, we're a sovereign country, but why don't we outsource the printing of our money to a foreign non-governmental organization and just pay a fee to have somebody else do the job that our Congress was supposed to do? And so, I mean, you talk about an in your face, ultimate in disrespect. They capture the slaves with the Queen's Bank, and then they make us pay them annual homage on the 15th. It's again, it is it's a scam. It's voluntary. They convince us through narrative that we need to sign this form, which is a confession form. We need to contract with them. Without our signature, there's no contract. There's just scary narrative. But when we unfortunately sign the contract, then they enforce the contract. But it's
Understood.
the thing about the IRS more than anything, not beyond the fact that it's 1,000% unconstitutional, is that if you want to look at it from a biblical standpoint and from a law standpoint versus legal, the highest form of moral law is mutual consent. We didn't mutually consent to this racket, this foreign enterprise with its collection agency known as the IRS and the Federal Reserve. Mutual consent requires a reasonable expectation that total honesty and disclosure took place and that both parties knew what the deal is that they're consenting to. The Federal Reserve System was a 3+ year in the making Ponzi scheme sold to Americans as a legitimate institution of trust that was here to help we the people. It was a lie from the word go. So it violated the very idea of mutual consent. And then they lied to us to get our signature on a form that then obligates us to pay something that They just create it out of thin air. Money, they create out of thin air, then they leverage it, and then they extract it from us. And they constantly they've given our government a blank credit card since 1913 to use at will, with no intention to ever have them pay it back. The whole conversation back and forth about who's more prudent, who's going to pay the debt down better, faster, who's going to balance them. It's all that is all a divide and conquer narrative. There has never been any intent to pay down the debt. The debt is the whole story. Debt slavery, debt regulation, debt encumbrance, debt manufacturing out of thin air so that all of their lies can have infinite funding because they can push buttons or print ink on paper and create as much of this infinite fantasy script to finance their infinite amount of lies to keep us in a state of ignorance. And what did Christ say? My people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. Well, these people are very good at manufacturing things that have no real knowledge in the words that come out of their mouths.
Yes. Well, thank you. That moves, we're looking at some dates. Here's another notable date moving forward here. May 17th is National Prayer Day, not for one day, but a declaration of prayer for 49 days. Going back to Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox, what do you make of this, May 17th, 49 days of prayer, and why is this so important on the timeline of leading up to July 4th?
May 17th was the date that George Washington did the prayer for the United States of America. And the going back to May 17th is Trump's signal that this is an important day in the life of the people, and that the 49 days that end on July 4th become very significant if you've been praying for the whole 49 days. And it's about prayer.
Interesting. Yeah. Yes. And I think if you've got at least a call to prayer, and if depending on how many participate for 49 days, since it is a battle between good and evil, I think that that tips the scales a little bit. Captain Rob, what's your take on May 17th?
To me, I view the scriptures as a quantum law book. There are laws and principles in that book that have been written over, 1600, however many years, thousands of years. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn away from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. Repent is a legal term, basically. It's like rephrase your thinking, understand where you've got it wrong. If you've made a mistake or if maybe you've been fooled, dig deep, find enough humility, turn to God and pray and ask for forgiveness, and He'll infinitely forgive us. If we walk around like a bunch of arrogant assholes with our butts on our shoulders, thinking that we've got it all figured out and every problem in the world is somebody else's fault, it's not ours, it couldn't be us, we didn't do this to ourselves, we're never going to heal. So George Washington knew that. The founding fathers knew that. They had a Repentance Day on May 17th of 1776 and asked for the Lord's help before signing the Declaration of Independence. It sounds a lot like to me we're probably getting ready to sign or make a new Declaration of Independence, more like a republic and less like a captured bunch of sheep and cattle that we have been since 1913.
Can
That
I
makes
add
all the
another
sense.
comment about that?
Oh, please do.
The Trump wrote a new Declaration of Independence that
That's
he
right.
issued on July 4th of his last alleged term on the 2020. That
Yes.
Declaration of Independence, which I have read, uh, is what I believe he is going to do. The other piece that's very interesting is May the 20th is the final date of the Omar, which is when all debts are supposed to be relieved, according to biblical Omar.
Interesting. I made note of that May 20th, so that wasn't on my timeline, but it is now. Thank you, sir. And while you're raising the declaration that President, and I recall looking at that as well back in the previous terms. So it would make sense on the timeline. May 17th, call to prayer. May 20th, the debt situation. July 4th is the celebration. Is it going to be more just about more fireworks and bigger barbecues? What do you think? You've touched on it, but elaborate, if you will, Colonel Lennox. What makes this so significant, this 250th? What do you anticipate happening?
The first thing I anticipate happening is he's going to make it clear that we are once again the Republic of the United States, not some corporation. He's also going to make clear that all of your debts are going to disappear if they haven't already. He's also going to make clear that we go forward as the Republic. And I believe he's going to make clear to the states that they have to understand what the Republic is and the Constitution. Because the Constitution is very clear that the number one law in the land is the U.S. Constitution. And in 1803, in the Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court said that if it's not approved in the Constitution, it's not legal, which I think is very interesting. And
Oh, it
and our
sure
friend
is.
Derek,
Mhm.
our friend Derek, can talk more about that. But that's what I believe July 4th is about. It's about telling people that they're under the Constitution. They're no longer going to be worrying about maritime law every time they go into a courtroom. They're going to be looking at, uh, yeah, my brain just went dead. Um, they're going to be looking at common law and what I would call Christian law, and that's what they're going to be looking at. And that they have to understand that this country was founded based on the principles of Christ, not necessarily on the 1863 King James version of the Bible. I think.
Wow. Thank you, sir. Captain Rob, you care to contribute to that? July 4th, what's it mean? You unpacked a lot there, Colonel Sellers. Thank you.
Colonel
Rob,
Sellers.
any viewpoints?
Yes, sir. First of all,
Uh,
thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Colonel. That was brilliant. And to your point, you know, the Declaration of Independence was a covenant to God. It was an agreement. It was not a religious document. It was a testimonial document that says we know where our rights come from and our liberties come from, and we will self govern ourselves as sovereign individuals under the laws and principles that are timeless and indestructible and immutable. They're not regulated, they're not permission, there's no gatekeepers, there's no hands in the middle that need to interpret for us because we're just too stupid. We didn't go to seminary college and we can not possibly know, how to self-govern. All of this diffusion, distraction, and deception is compounded into putting us into slavery by ignorance. And Our Declaration of Independence was independence from the bankers, from the central church, the central bank, the central king, the ones that assumed from the jump every square inch of land and all property and all resources were theirs. And they would decide what we could keep, whatever pittance we could keep. But the central bankers, they put debt on us to encumber our labor for the rest of our lives. Once we're in debt, we're constantly servicing that debt. Our number one master has to be debt. That's the first bills that have to be paid before the lights, before the food, before the kids, before anything, right? So the central banks bathe us in debt, and that controls our labor. The Admiralty law system starts with the assumption and the presumption that every square inch of earth is theirs. They own it. They have jurisdiction. And if they don't like your behavior, they'll charge you with a violation. And then that by that process, they extract our liberties. So the Admiralty law system controls our present day liberties, and the Federal Reserve controls our future labor. And both of them are
Wow.
extraction systems. They they tell us what our liberties are, and they tell us who we're going to work for. That goes back to you can't serve two masters. Am I going to serve the master that put me here by design with purpose? Or am I going to serve the Rothschilds because I've got a bunch of numbers in a bank account that need to be serviced and satisfied? So we have to be independent. That means serve the bankers or serve the maker. And we've got to choose. As a people, we have to choose.
I thank you, sir. I want to just to clear the record here, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox. Pardon me for calling you Colonel Sellers. I just interviewed Chuck Sellers, Colonel Sellers, on Conversations of Consequence, which our audience should go look at. Extraordinary interview, and I just made a mistake there. So my apologies,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you to our audience. What I'm learning thus far in this discussion is our sovereignty, as intended by our creators, being returned. That's May 17th, May 20th, July 4th, as discussed by this panel, is extraordinary, and something faith, hope, and love. Boy, hope is shining quite bright there right now, folks. But we have a danger zone. Believe me, we'll end this broadcast on a positive note, but we must address some of the issues of concern between now and then. For example, Juan O'Savin, and I'm paraphrasing Juan, he was on this very broadcast a couple of short weeks ago, if that, and he stated 60, we can expect carnage 60 to 80%. And he said that's underestimating. 60 to 80% worse than due to the bond mess that's coming and the systemicness of that. 60 to 80% worse than what we experienced on the collapse of 0809, which was a pretty big collapse. It was global. Of course, it was orchestrated by the deep state and the bankers. But point being, that's an important, that's an alarming statement, 60 to 80%. I spoke with retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossi of Australia, and retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt. They're both on the record recently expressing concerns for a collapse that people need to prepare for on many fronts. Going back to Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox, how do you care to weigh in on the comments that I've just provided from Juan, from Ricardo Bossi, from Brigadier General Blaine Holt? Do you have concerns about a bond collapse, a stock and real estate correction? And if so, is this something in your crystal ball that you think may be taking place before July 4th? And is this inevitable? Is it inevitable?
My concern is that there are so many people who have, quote, a 401k, and that 401k is not going to have any value, any real value when the market goes down. one of the issues surrounding the market and surrounding the bond market is, and the bond market is probably the most critical, is that 1871, we were a corporation until this year. Those bonds were done by the corporation. When the corporation went bankrupt, that's when all the bonds went bankrupt. Now, the bonds for the school systems and the other ones, that's another big challenge because they put so many of those bonds into pension funds in the states. So the pension that a school teacher's expecting to get, there isn't going to be any money to pay it if the bonds collapse. So that piece is of concern. But the reality is, when we talk about abundance and we talk about the money that will be coming back to people from their scam birth certificates, that's going to be available. It's there. When they go in for their interview, they will get a phone or a card or a combination of devices that will give them a number. The number will depend upon age, it will depend on other aspects of their uh, spirituality and some other things. But when you look at that and you look at how that's structured and how the payment of that's going to be structured, I don't believe that for the people who are now sovereign, they have gotten their debt paid off. They're going to receive some sum of money that will allow them to choose the job they want to take, whatever it might be. I believe that worrying about the stock market, which has been manipulated and controlled for so long, much as the Federal Reserve controlled the bonds, same way, same thing. And since 1929, when they had the stock market crash, and I look back to 1492, when they were selling tulip bulbs for $1,000 a piece. And when I used to teach finance, I would talk about those things. When silver was going up because the Hunt brothers were trying to fix it. And I told my students, I said, what goes up is going to come back down. And the stock market has gone on unbelievable numbers that aren't supported. My comment.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Um, Captain Rob, any comments on this topic of a bond collapse? Is it inevitable? What's your take on all this?
Well, the bond market is easily 2.5 to 3 times larger than the stock market and the equity market. I mean, we have to understand that the world reserve currency is debt. It's not an asset. It's a debt note. It's an IOU to the issuer. There's about conservatively 300 to 330 trillion dollars in global debt. If that's all counterfeit and it's got to get out of the system so that we can go back to an asset-backed system, then you can start to begin to see how decentralization, oil markets, gold and silver, leveling the playing field, bringing the Iraq back up to international standards, getting the IRGC out of Iraq, having a president elected, allowing their oil to now flow into 3 different countries. They hired a president on the 11th, Saturday. They're going to have a prime minister here any day now. The dinar is probably going to be revalued from its suppressed rates back in 03. Uh, that's going to kick off the Abraham Accords in the Middle East and all of the unbelievable technology. Everything leads back to a level playing field. Now, we also have to realize that one of the greatest lies that we have all lived with since we were born is this idea of scarcity. That we're running out of land, we're running out of water, we're running out of food, we don't have enough resources, and only the angels in government can help ration the very limited resources. That is probably the biggest lie, other than the lie that Satan's not real. There's really no evil in the world. It's just that's just a biblical boogeyman story. Well, evil's real and scarcity is a lie. Look at what's happening in America. Crypto capital of the world, energy capital of the world, uh, entrepreneurial capital of the world, freedom capital of the world. We are freeing the world. We are freeing the Persians. We're freeing the Middle East. Trump has signed 8 peace deals, about to be 9.
Mhm.
The whole world, we're divorcing NATO. We're exposing the EU. We're
Mhm.
exposing the city of London. We're freeing the Middle East. We're activating the Abraham Accords. We're trying to get rid of the IRS here in the United States. And so when we disconnect from all of that the cobwebs in the house and all the junk, counterfeit lies and counterfeit debt and counterfeit taxation and counterfeit drugs they call healthcare, and we have to make a transition. I did a post today. There are 10 technologies that exist right now today to basically empower and enrich every person instantaneously. Value can move like water. Value can move like oxygen. Value can move at the speed of intent. We don't need a gatekeeper. We don't need a regulator to tell us how I can transfer truth and value back and forth between anybody in the world. Our problem is not abundance. Our problem is not that there's not enough wealth out there. Our problem is us. Our problem is, are we going to be able to self govern? I mean, we can go back to the biblical days and you look at when Moses helped escape the Jews across the Red Sea, right? They got them out of slavery, crossed the Red Sea, and they went over into the desert. They were free. And for 40 years, they ran around, bitched and moaned, didn't know what the hell to do with their freedom. You can be free, but not found. If you don't know who you are and whose you are, what the laws and the rules are, and why you're sucking oxygen in your mouth, then you're going to get out of debt slavery, and all you're going to do is be bitch and moan about it, not have any gratitude, not find purpose. If we don't want to be slaves, that means that we have to then become the governor of our own lives. Well, a lot of people have not been taught how to think clearly or how to govern themselves. The biggest risk is going to be the damage that we do to ourselves because we're incapable of regulating ourselves. We're happy to bitch about everybody else that regulates us, but it's going to come back on us and on our shoulders to not be spoon fed every decision and every thought and every belief. And we're going to have to figure out this thing called life internally. I think the bigger risk to us is not resources, it's wisdom.
You raised some very thought-provoking, important points. Do you care to pick up on any of that, Lieutenant Colonel Lennox, before I move us into another question or
I,
two?
I used to teach a lot part time, and I would tell my students early on in the course that they were part of 10 to 15, maybe 20% of the people who were trying to grow their education, and that there were 80% of the people were probably taking a six-pack of beer home at night and watching the news on television and falling asleep in their chair after their six-pack of beer was gone. And those six-pack of beer people are the ones that Rob is talking about that are going to really struggle with what happens. The idea that everybody's going to have abundance is great. I've had that discussion with my wife recently about how do you get those people trained up so they understand. There's a guy by the name of Cotter that wrote a book on change management, and Cotter said it takes 10 years. I've experienced it. It takes 10 years to get the people all the way into major changes. And so when we think about it, those of us like Rob, myself, you, John, a whole bunch of other people are going to have a hard job teaching the people how to deal with the change because that's going to be the
Interesting.
biggest challenge.
Wow. Well, I guess a course correction for all of humanity doesn't happen by the flip of a switch. So we got a ways to go on our transformation and our ascension. I want to abruptly switch gears in the same category somewhat, but Doge. Doge opened the eyes of many people. We are coming to learn of the mortgage fraud, the bond fraud that each of you gentlemen spoke about, the naked shorts on gold and silver, credit card interest abuse, the trading of us as a commodity through a bond, through the birth certificate. The episode that you and I did, Colonel Lennox, was extraordinary, and I encourage anyone who missed that to go into our archives on Rumble last month or so or on my website and go watch that episode about the bond issue. But we look at the interest abuse on credit cards, the trading of us as a bond, if you will, via the birth certificate, the illegal and unconstitutionality of the IRS, the income tax itself, the Federal Reserve, the fractional reserve lending by the money as debt system, which created booms and busts at will for the bankers' profits at the expense of hardworking American people. We were not born to be a corporate asset, leading to a question. Again, I'll refer to retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi. I interview every other Monday on Bosi Briefs. He's also on our military panel, which each of you gentlemen have been on and continue to be on. Thank you. Bosi said, proceeds of crime, you don't get to keep it. Now that's interesting. So the American people are becoming, and rightfully so, outraged as they're waking up to all the issues that we and I have been talking about here. So beginning with Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox, walk us through how and when you see this playing out. Again, going back to that Bosi quote, the proceeds of crime, you don't get to keep it. That's a pretty important statement when you look at the gargantuan picture of all the stolen of everything for how many years. So if they don't get to keep it, how does this end for them, the enemy, and for us with all
Well,
that
the
in mind,
enemy,
all that fraud?
yeah, the enemy, I believe, is being taken care of to a large extent. We had 750,000 sealed indictments. That assumes that it's only one person. In a lot of cases, it's probably 5 to 10 people. So we're talking millions of people who are under sealed indictments who are going to one of the 7 locations because they committed a crime against humanity, treason, or one of the other things that can go in front of a military tribunal. That's going to take time to finish. Part of the reason for the EBS, which I believe will come soon, is that they're going to do, hopefully, the rest of the cleanup, the arrests, the sending to for prosecution. They're starting now to talk about the ones we already know happened. They happened between 2017 and 2020. There were a lot of people that were hung at Gitmo, and they're big name people, and we'll see those on the EBS. But the reality is they've been gone for a long time, and all the clones and the actors and stuff have been playing their parts.
Central
The
casting.
challenge is going. The challenge is
Central
going to
casting.
be, as we move forward and as we clean up all of this, how many of the people that are left that didn't get sealed indictments, that are maybe the part of the 20% that would go out and cuss and scream and yell and holler, what are we going to do about them? Are we going to try to rehabilitate them, or are we going to send them off? My understanding is that the Galactic Federation has an island, or not an island, but a planet where they put people that need rehabilitation or will never be rehabilitated. And that's going to happen. I think there are people that are going to end up on that planet. I think that one of the things I saw in the last week twice from two different sources was Trump is the president, commander in chief of the Galactic Federation. That's a very interesting thought. And he stated as much in a speech recently where he said he freed the planet. When you go back and think about that, what does that mean? So, anyway, I think there's going to be
Fascinating.
turmoil for a while. How long? It's hard to say.
All that fraud and debt that I bullet pointed just a moment ago, sir, that broadly speaking, the 140,000-foot view, the majority of those various frauds and debts and all the things we touched on, that goes away with them because it was all fraud. And as you
Yeah.
stated, not constitutional, not God's law, not the law of the land either. And so the majority, broadly speaking, goes over to them, and and we're unburdened. And not only are we unburdened, we're repatriating some of that stolen wealth. So that's the big picture and takeaway I'm getting in listening to each of your responses. Do you want to take this on, Captain Rob? I set up all the various frauds. How does it end for them? How does it end for us? Because that's at the doorstep, relatively speaking.
It is. It is. I mean, I can give you two more analogies that go along with Lieutenant Colonel Bossy's statement. Number one is fraud vitiates everything. You can't keep the stolen loot. You can't prosper from corruption and deception. And the good book, law book, says something about the wicked will store up the wealth and it'll be returned to the righteous. So, however you want to call it, if they have it all, look, we know they have it all. We get these little statements from Social Security that tell us exactly to the penny how much money we've reported into the system and how much taxes that we've paid and how much FICA we've paid and what our measly little money return is and their little gain, their little accounting game. But the bigger picture is they know down to the penny how much they've stolen from us, monetized from us, and usury interest rate and mortgage debt and card debt and taxation and death and destruction and warfare and you name it. So again, the amount of wealth that has been stolen from us spiritually, physically, and monetarily is It's incalculable. It's impossible to understand. I mean, how do you put a value on, if all wars are bankers' wars and they throw, men into the meat grinder and kill 1 million of us for profit? What's the price on that? What's the cost on the inventions they would have gone on and made, the earnings they would have made, the wealth, the cost to the families, the cost to everybody? See, when you counterfeit money, it's no value to the person that can infinitely counterfeit the money, and then they can use the fake money to come up with any elaborate scam in the world. Moon landings, COVID bioweapon campaigns, World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam, Afghan, no matter what, if you can just print it out of thin air and then we'll go to work for something that they just created out of thin air, then our master is this counterfeit script because we have to serve the P&L of an entity that issues monopoly money, and then we order our lives around the rules made by the people that created the monopoly money. It's the biggest scam in the history of mankind. And if you think about it, the swan song of lessons in the scripture was Jesus flipped over the central bankers that were set up shop in the temple, that screwed every person that was there for Holy Week with 10 cents on the dollar exchange rates, usury interest rates, protected in the temple, stealing, robbing, unequal weights and measures, protected by their political goon squad and bodyguards. And when Jesus saw the fraud and he flipped over the table and called it a den of thieves and they were a bunch of vipers and a bunch of lion scumbags, 5 days later they hung him on a tree. We had the master teach us the way the place is rigged, and yet for somehow or another we can't seem to connect the dots. So,
Well, I'll tell you what, thank God this is, we're all here today, and it's no coincidence. It's an extraordinary time to be witnessing
And the
this
reason
coming to an end.
Trump had Andrew Jackson's picture on the wall of his office was because Andrew Jackson was the first one to go after the central bankers.
Mhm. Yep.
and
Well,
there was a video clip, John, of President Trump a few
Mhm.
days ago walking out of the White House. It was a meeting. I don't know if it was with Secretary Bissett or financial meeting, but he walked through the White House underneath uh, McKinley or whatever the president was, the last president we had just before Woodrow Wilson signing the Federal Reserve Act. Again, another calm. He was going into a financial
Yes.
meeting or strategy meeting with Treasury or maybe the IRS or something, but I remember distinctly a decode breaking down over that was an accident. Remember Dan Scavino showed the Air Force One that was now painted in the new JFK airplane livery colors, and then it showed the
Yes.
flag
Yes.
with SpaceX on it, and it showed the eagle
Mhm.
on top of the golden eagle, the
Mhm.
iron eagle on top of the flowing golden script, the golden ledger. I mean, you couldn't have a bigger calm than that. And I mean, that's
Well,
Liberation Day. We will be a republic again, and we will feed this fake counterfeit debt back to these people and have them choke on it. The EU is choking on their green climate scam. They don't make anything. They don't think about this. I may have said this before, John, but a 1 square mile on the Thames River called the City of London, a non-governmental city state, we collectively owe almost $40 trillion to a 1 square mile patch of land that doesn't hire anyone, grow anything, build anything, distribute anything. All they do is regulate capital markets and exchange rates. And somehow or another, just us owe this 1 square mile group of the City of London money bankers $40 trillion. For what?
Mhm.
For what?
You, Rob, you mentioned comms. I want to just throw this in very quickly, and then I want to talk about the Straits of Hormuz from an interesting perspective in a moment. Talk about a recent comm just yesterday, I believe. And folks, I don't have an image of it. I could have put it into the show. You can go find it to our audience on social media. His dress. We know she's been communicating to us through her wardrobe and through other things. But this white dress with that erratic kind of black stuff all over the place. Have you seen it? Have you had a chance to analyze it? Have you looked into it at all? Any comments on Tom's, Rob, on Melania's dress, and then we'll have Colonel Lennox weigh in. Yeah.
Well,
What does the dress mean?
the first one, she had at another event, I believe it was the night of his second inauguration. She was wearing a beautiful white gown that had kind of like a black X. I don't know if you remember seeing it, kind of had a Z on the belt and a Z. It
Mm,
looked like
mhm.
it looked like redactions, on these documents that they'll release the Epstein documents. They're going to redact the hell out of. You can't read anything. It looked like just Trump was in black and white in a perfect tux, and she was in white with the black. To me, that seemed like a calm as well. This, I know the dress that you're speaking about. I'll defer to Lieutenant Colonel Lennox. I know there has to be a calm there, but I haven't dug into
Oh,
it
there
very
is.
well.
No problem. Did you happen to see that the recent dress a day or two ago, Colonel Lennox?
I had I have not seen the dress. I've heard what she said,
Okay,
but I have not seen the dress. And so
okay.
I
Well,
know
let's
she
let
wears the
yes,
dresses with a calm.
yes. Well, thank you. The Straits of Hormuz seems like President Trump has brilliantly, of course, with our great military, but from the top down, seized control now over the Straits of Hormuz. Am I right? Colonel Lennox, you want to pick that up? And wh- from a 40,000 foot view, just connect the dots. Now that we're 7, 8 weeks into the Iran situation, from an economic standpoint, President and the white military actually comes. I think about China, I think about London, I think about the exposure of Israel, but from an economic standpoint, I mean, he basically said a week or two ago, "Go take the oil." He was telling everyone before we seize control of the straits. Then he said, "Buy the oil from us." Where are we at right now that we've seized control over the straits, and what's the economic impact and the big change that's occurring concerning that oil and that passageway?
I want to go back a little bit to when the vice president walked out of the talks with the Iranians.
Mm.
That was a strategic move by Trump. There was never an intent to have anything happen in those talks that would lead to the total end of the discussion. Now, the Straits of Hormuz are very interesting because he said, I'm going to put the Navy at the end of the straits and block all of you. I think that has to do with Europe, not with China, because he's taking care of China. China gets a lot of oil from Venezuela. They've got the canal. They can get all the oil they need. He's taking care of them because they have an agreement with he and she. They've had an agreement for years. But when he told the Europeans to come get your oil and they didn't, he said, now you either pay us or you pay Iran for your oil. You buy it from me or you buy it from them. And I've controlled the Straits of Hormuz. So you figure out what to do. Because, and Rob said this earlier, what he really is doing is taking the Brits out of the Middle East. They controlled
That's
the entire
extraordinary.
Middle East for years. He's
Mhm,
going to take them out of Iran. He's going to take them out of Israel because Israel's last and it's getting
mhm.
close.
Yes, it is.
And now, okay, Mr. Britt, where are you going to buy your oil? You're going to buy it from me or from Iran? You're going to buy it from Iran.
Brilliant.
You're going to pay a fee to have it shipped from Iran to Great Britain. You're going to buy it from me. You're going to pay the same price. And that's for the Brits, the French, the Germans, uh, probably not the Italians or the Hungarians. The Spanish will pay the price because he's also trying to destroy the EU. And how do you destroy the EU? By the oil price and the gas price. And how do you do that? You decide who's going to pay what price. And so you can control all of Europe out of the Straits of Hormuz.
Mhm.
Tom
You know,
steered.
well, great theory. And if you think about the brilliance, this must have been years in the planning stage and years in the preparation and years in the making, and they're knocking it out in 8 or 12 weeks, changing the critical structure that has ruled the world to an extent. Rob, do you care to finish off the Straits of Hormuz?
I absolutely do, brother. This y'all have teed this up for me. I did a post earlier today, and I called it "The Donald's Divine Dominoes." And let's look at what's happened the last 8 to 12 weeks. Okay, first of all, he frees the people of Venezuela. The narco
Mhm.
election songbird Maduro has been singing like Whitney Houston. He's been telling us not only about narco terrorism, but the oil markets, the voting machines.
Mhm.
Okay. He's named 50 or 60 senators that have taken narco terrorism money in their political campaigns. All right. So we have a Venezuelan oil partnership reborn. They have like the second most or the most amount of oil reserve in the world. And now that we're partners with Venezuela in oil, and he just does this coincidentally before he goes into Hormuz, right? I have intel from a very reliable source that they were saying there's 123 or 130 vessels that can ships that can hold up to 2 million barrels of oil coming into the Gulf of America. The number is 385. 385 ships are coming to America to buy oil from the world's new gas station. So the Iran special operation is launched. The city of London's hands are exposed. The 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 Lloyd's of London stunt has been called. What they did with the insurance premiums to not help us. Uh, the Iran terror threat, the IRGC, has been decapitated. It took what 2 days to end their army and their navy and their air force. I mean, they were completely all of their government leaders and all of their bought and paid for goon squads were taken out in 48 hours. Um, the Hormuz control was flipped. The world energy markets were freed. The Iraq was freed of IRGC infiltration and control. Iraq's energy markets were opened. Um, an Iraq presidential election took place on Saturday, April the 11th. Um, Iraq had Ernst and Young in 2 days later, auditing their books, auditing their assets, auditing their debt markets and their equity markets, getting them ready to be basically revaluated and welcomed back onto the national scene. Um, the Iraqi dinar revaluation has to come next if they want the Abraham Accords to work and there to be a level playing field, not only in the Middle East, but all around the world. Um, China agrees to stop sending aid or helping Iraq. And it not only did China and Russia do nothing when Trump launched Epic Fury, they didn't run in there to Iran's aid. That ought to tell us everything that we need to know. But they've also now committed to President Trump, as you posted today, China is not in any way going to give military support, aid, or comfort to Iran or the IRGC in any way. Uh, the EU is now isolated. They've got to pay much higher oil prices. They're choking on their green energy policies, which obviously don't fuel airplanes or farm equipment. They're seeing gasoline prices and oil prices go through the roof. Uh, the City of London's liquidity is draining because Lloyd's of London lost all of that unbelievably high margin risk insurance premiums they got to collect from every single tanker that floated through the Strait of Hormuz for 47 years. They manipulated the insurance market and extracted ungodly amounts of wealth. Well, when they canceled the insurance policy, who was ready to activate brand new ones? President Trump and our Treasury Secretary. The Federal Reserve's petrodollar was already dead before, but is 100% dead right now. 2 days ago, there was an email that came out or a post by President Trump or someone in his cabinet that NGO funding is ending per the Treasury. There will be no money flows to non-governmental organizations from taxpayers to these unaccountable entities, full stop. So the deep state is being drained of liquidity, being squeezed by oil markets. They're being squeezed by their whole scam is falling apart before our eyes. And I like to leave it at this too, John. The Department of the Federal Reserve Defense is dead. What we have had with military bases all over the world, it's not about protecting American liberty. It's about dropping bombs on heads if people want to challenge the world reserve currency. You want to trade that gold with oil, Omar? Gaddafi? We came, we saw, he died.
Right.
They ha ha ha. Every war is a banker's war, and every reason we've been told we had to go to war was a lie. It was about control and money. Okay, so why did they change it from the Department of Defense back to the Department of War? Because we don't have a global world reserve currency to defend anymore. We heard this week they're going to cut trillions of dollars in the national defense budget. They're going to shut down bases all over the world, and they're going to bring hundreds of thousands of our troops back home because we don't need to be deployed all over the world defending the Queen's dollar. So the Department of War is standing tall. The Department of Defense is dead because we're going to now defend the US dollar, not the Federal Reserve debt note. We can do that at home. We don't need to defend the US dollar in Chile or the Philippines or Italy or Afghanistan. If we'll just take care of business in our own country and let everybody else take care of business in their own country, we'll all be just fine. We don't need to be the world's top cop. The whole idea of that was a lie it was a fallacy of premise from Bretton Woods forward. They created the world reserve currency, and America's bases need to be populated all over the world to take care of the Federal Reserve's world reserve currency. That all of that is done. It's over.
Yes. When you think back, welcome back, Lieutenant Colonel Lennox. When you think back to the days when President Trump, Rob, everything you just said was extraordinary. I mean, any one of those things are earth-shattering events, and they're all happening. You go back to what President Trump used to say all the time, you're going to be winning and winning so much, you're going to win and win. Well, he kept his promise. Promises made, promises kept. We are slaughtering this deep state global cabal apparatus. We have obliterating things that you've just laid out and this broadcast has done, and we are in fact winning. And once we completely, once the mainstream news completely collapses upon itself, and programs like this or other narratives get out there, and truth becomes news. Thank goodness Gitmo is going to be opening up soon, the media center there. Boy, talk about another massive victory, pouring truth in nonstop instead of all the BS they've been feeding us. I have like maybe one or two more things to wrap up here. So since the restoration of constitutional and God's money evolves to an extent around gold and silver and perhaps other commodities in restoring constitutional money, uh, uh, Lieutenant Colonel Lennox, we'll go to you, sir. What are your forecasts of gold and silver? That's an important commodity right now, and especially with the naked shorts coming to an end with the banksters. What are your forecasts, if you can forecast out where you see gold and silver come the end of this calendar year and into 2027? Because these two metals are going to play a major role, in my opinion, on the stability of our currency, in part.
I see silver my by 2027 at some point, probably at what would be the equivalent of $2,000 an ounce today. That's equivalent. We always have to look at the fiat currencies going away. So we
Right.
have to look at how are we going to value these things. I believe
Mhm.
the last I heard was that the Chinese are paying $150 an ounce for silver. The market today the spot is $80.21. So,
Mhm.
and then if we look at gold, gold is the bigger from the standpoint of a financial tool,
Yes.
not from what am I thinking? A manufacturing standpoint, but from
Yeah.
a gold currency standpoint. Gold should go well above $5,000 an ounce, probably six, seven, $8,000 an ounce by the end of 2007. And the whole
27.
thing being that those prices, there's an unlimited amount of money because they took 672 airplanes full of gold from the Vatican alone. And
Mhm.
people say, well, where's the gold in Fort Knox? It's not in Fort Knox. It's in Reno, Nevada. It's in China. And they've been working with the Chinese uh, dragons on the gold for quite some time now, probably 4 or 5 years. And
Mhm.
the amount of gold is huge. The amount of silver is going to be huge. The silver, the biggest problem with silver is that there's more paper silver than there is real silver
Mhm.
on an annualized basis. All
Yes.
the
I
banks
think
playing
I think it's
games with
I think
silver.
it's I think it's 300 contracts for every 1 ounce of silver. It's a 300
Yeah,
to 1 ratio. It's
it's
ridiculous. Yeah.
301 to ratio. That's exactly what I've heard too. And it's huge, you know. So silver's got to go up,
Yeah.
and all those guys aren't going to be able to make their contract because there's not any silver for them to make the contract with. And they're trying to buy them out with fiat dollars. Nobody's going to take fiat dollars in 6 months because in 6 months
Yes.
it's going to be all gold.
They're
So,
trapped. We finally got them.
they're absolutely trapped. The bankers that have been running the Federal Reserve are trapped.
You bet. There's the Milani address. What are you indicating, Rob?
I found it. I don't know why. Just there's a divine connect. So this decoder says we are in the last act. The pattern on her dress, Melania's dress, is from
Mhm.
artist Kay Donaci. She recently showed her art in Song for the Last Art at Pallant House Gallery in Chichester. So the symbol is the last act.
Final
That's
act.
what that design means. That's the calm Melania
Hmm.
was wearing on her dress. We're in the last act.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that on. Um, okay, so the same question to you, Rob, if you will. Your forecast for gold and silver in 2026 and 2027. And with everything that our panel here to our audience has shared with us in this last hour or so, we can see that we are approaching the final act, especially with the trigger dates of the 17th of May, the 20th of May, and July 4th, and all the things this panel has brought up. It's been a great episode. We're got one more territory to cover. But before we do, Rob, what's your forecast on gold and silver at 2026, 2027?
I don't want to mislead anyone. I really do not. Everything is relative. There's context to these things. President Trump, if he wanted to, could it's on the books at $42 an ounce. He could market at $25,000 an ounce as a book entry if he wanted to, just to expand the Treasury's balance sheet. And he'd be, if you go back to when they locked in that $42 price back in 1971, if you adjusted it for inflation, he could easily justify, and he can lawfully, with a stroke of a pen, mark the value of gold up to $15,000 or $20,000 if he wants to, and it would make economic sense to do it. But it would also benefit every nation in the world that has been buying gold, because you can't have a $10,000 gold in America and an $8,000 gold somewhere else. If we're the crypto capital of the world and going to have the strongest currency in the world, the U.S. dollar, let's not mistake the US dollar with being the world reserve currency. Just because our dollar is strong doesn't mean we get to bully everybody around the world or cut them off from using our dollar, because it, a strong dollar can be a thing without all the strings attached, where like the Biden sanctioned Russia the minute they went into they weaponized the SWIFT system to sanction Russia, and all it did was drive up gold and drive up oil, which made Russia extremely rich. But everybody in the world looked around and goes, well, wait a minute. If America can do that because Russia got on their bad side, what could they do to us? Well, an independent US dollar that's strong does not have the power to go around sanctioning everybody and cutting them off from the Bank of International Settlement or the International Monetary Fund because they're the biggest bouncer in the bar. Couple of things from a historical standpoint. When markets are recovering, silver almost always outperforms gold tremendously on the way up when markets are recovering. And when economies begin to slow down or there's a recession, silver normally performs much worse than gold does. That being said, batteries, electric cars, satellites, drones, AI, the demand for silver is massive. The manipulation of silver by the banks is massive. The fact that they have not really been drilling for brand new silver over the last 6 years is a huge supply and demand imbalance. So if someone were to put a gun to my head and say, which metal do you prefer? I would certainly say silver. But I I have no idea where the price is going to be. Look, the good news is our quality of life is going to be phenomenal. Costs are going to go down. Housing prices are going to go down. Uh, Inflation is going to go down. Markets are going to go up. Benefits are going to go up. No taxes on tips or Social Security or overtime. Maybe no taxes on anything. Tariff revenues are going to flow in, and there's going to be some form of repatriation for people that have been honest and haven't cheated the system. We are going to be repatriated wealth one way or the other. So as I like to say to people, if you're making $65,000 a year today and nothing changes except your costs drop by 50%, you're you've doubled your wealth. If your lifestyle can buy twice as much and one spouse doesn't have to go to work and you don't have to outsource your kids to daycare, but the top number, you go from maybe 65 to $75,000 a year, but all of a sudden one of you can quit and stay home and you can both have new cars and afford a house, then is it really the nominal number that matters, or is it the quality of your
Mhm.
life that matters? So I think
Mhm.
sometimes we get caught up too much in the what's the stock price going to be, what's XRP going to be, what's gold going to be, what's silver going to be, what's going to happen to house price. Look, if house prices drop 50%, it's going to be an across the board 50% drop. And if I want to sell my house, it's worth 50% less worth 50% less in Georgia and move to Florida and buy a house. I'm going to be buying a house down there at 50% of the cost of the house that the cost that it previously was. So it's all relative,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Mhm.
people are going to go, oh my God, my house went up, my house went down. It's going to be the same for everyone. Okay. If car
Yes.
prices, it, it's, it's the context of lifestyle and quality of living that matters. Here's the most important thing I would say, John, is all the money in the world disconnected from purpose leads to a train wreck. If you have a whole bunch
Mhm.
of money and thinking that's it, that's the end all be all, you can look at any study you ever want to look at of people that win the lottery, they're total basket case within 5 years. People that
Mhm.
these athletes that go in the NFL, they live paycheck to paycheck because they have 47 family members. They start living a lifestyle where they can barely live on their $22 million a year contract, and as soon as they break a knee or lose their contract, they're bankrupt in 12 months. So
Yes.
there's a mindset to wealth. If we get a lot of money and it's disconnected from purpose, it's a train wreck waiting to happen.
Great, great analysis. Rob, you were a participant featured with some pretty notable names as well in a documentary that, to my producer, if you could pull up the website, uh, www.fruitionproductions.com. Let's pull that up on the screen while we're waiting to do that. Why don't you sup a bit for us, Rob? Talk about this documentary, how people can get it, what it addresses, who's in it. And again, to our producer, you can full screen the website and walk us through it. Thank you. Take it away, Rob.
Sure, sure. My very, very good friends, Chris and Maya, their husband and wife team in the LA area. This is I believe it's their third big movie that they've done. They're working on a fourth one on Hunter Biden's laptop. Um, and they have every name in the world that's important about that. But this movie, Money Disrupted in the Fed, um, I was just so blessed to have been reached out to maybe 18 months ago by some members of Mr. G. Edward Griffin's team. And they asked if I would mind promoting or interviewing a bunch of the featured guests that he was going to have at his Red Pill University annual conference that he has. And I
Hmm.
said I'd be more than happy to. So I ended up interviewing 6 or 8 different uh, people that are part of his Red Pill University. And so through that relationship, I knew that Chris and Maya were doing this movie called, Money Disrupted, about ending the Federal Reserve. And this documentary, in essence, is a 2-hour documentary with some of the biggest names that you would know in money that cover from 1776 to 2026 in the history of the Federal Reserve, the money system, decade by decade, how the money magicians screwed over the world, control the world, manipulate the world, cause the wars, cause the famines, cause the inflation. They're in essence, they always cause the fire. Then they want to position themselves as the firemen to save us from the fire. And then they want us to reelect them for being in the fire. So This is a 2-hour documentary that will help people understand 200 years or 250 years of money malfeasance. And G. Edward Griffin is the author of perhaps the most prominent book ever written on the Federal Reserve. He spent 30 to 40 years working on this. This is the fifth edition, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And I was able to get Mr. Griffin to be a part of the movie. But if the producer will scroll, if your partner will scroll down, I'd love to show him just the
Mhm.
names of people that are in this movie. Just keep scrolling down. I want you to see Robert Kiyosaki, Ron Paul. Let's see, keep going. There we go. G.
Yeah,
Edward
there you
Griffin
go.
by far. Ron Paul, he's in the movie. Simon McLaughlin, the CEO of Uphold. Lynette Zhang,
Mhm.
huge into gold and silver and precious metals. Andy Scheckman, same, CEO of Miles
Mhm.
Franklin. Coach JV is a big influencer in the XRP community. Linda P. Jones, great teacher, two-time author, uh, just a financial advisor and a very, very student, wise woman. There's my ugly mug on the right. My good friend Jake Claver, Beyond Broke Digital Ascension Group. He's the founder and CEO of that group. Uh, you can keep going. David McIntosh, president of the Club for Growth. Uh, just some of the biggest names in money and history and precious metals and in academia, in politics. Um, it's one of the greatest ways in the world for people to understand this one concept. The love of money is the root of all evil. And this movie documents exactly how the Federal Reserve has been one evil entity that has caused chaos the world over. Um, you can buy the movie right on the website. I think it's 1999 or something like that, but you can own a copy forever. You can stream it right from the website. You can watch the preview. Again, it's about a 2-hour movie, but I think it's one of the single most.
What's the
Sure.
best way? You were talking about they can stream it and watch it. Is it fruitionproductions.com? Is that
Correct.
the domain?
Fruitionproductions.com. You can go to my website at cool.show and find out about it there. I've had a 25-minute interview that just I did with G. Edward Griffin on my website. There are links on that to Fruition Production. But just Google money disrupted. That's all you got to do and you'll find it. You can't not find it. If I could bet, I would, John, if I could get every school, every business school, every Turning Point USA chapter, every homeschool parent, anyone that cares about money and society and culture and politics, we've got to stop being a financially ignorant society. People, we need to know our history. We need to know what happened to us. We need to know why we fought a war, how we got re enslaved, how we're now having to get unenslaved again by Donald Trump. And if we don't get our act together, we're going to go right back into slavery again. So we
Yeah,
have got
no
to up
question.
our game. This movie, I believe in 100 years from now, business schools and business professors are going to be talking about this documentary. They're going to be pointing back to this historical 2 hours of the history of banking tyranny and what it did to America and how much death and destruction it led to. And this is, we are living in one of the single greatest, most pivotal point in human history in the last 10 years.
When you look at the medical tyranny and the financial tyranny, just those two alone, uh, it's amazing we've survived as long as we have. And you're right, the history books later will look back at our generations and say those poor people, but they'll also look back at this time and say, well, they pulled themselves up from the bootstraps, and under God, Trump, the white hats, the military, and we the people finally fixed the mess. And that's where we are right now. If you want to close this out, Rob, with And back to the beginning of the show, when I mentioned those that don't have money or those that don't have assets, and believe me, I've bounced off of below zero several times in my life. I've been there. Okay. I said that this broadcast benefits every one of us. I hope you can clearly see that from all the information we've learned about what we have obliterated, slaughtered, neutered, and the new systems that are coming online. Rob, leave our audience with something inspirational for what's to come, and then Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox will close us out the same way. Take it away, Rob.
Sure. I would just say gratitude is the single most important attitude that we need to embrace. There's a difference between wealth and riches. One's spiritual, one's material. We've got to get the order correct. If we do, our cup will run over. We do not have a scarcity problem. We have a wisdom problem. And we're going through what a lot of people like to say the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world. Well, wealth again is an understanding, knowledge and understanding and wisdom of what life's all about, why we're here, how we've been lied to, how we fell asleep, what ownership we have to take for not being curious, not being comfort, being too comfortable, worrying too much about what other people might say about us if we were to ask questions, not wanting to be called a kook or a conspiracy theorist. Being able to find out who we are and whose we are and build that character, that's wealth. Bank accounts come and go. It takes a lot more time and effort to understand why we're even sucking oxygen and why we're here on this planet. There is going to be abundance for all of us. My advice would be to A, fear not, B, start going inward deeply, figuring out who you are, what you're going to do when things start to turn around, and how you're not going to freak out by how what more can the media do to have us not trust a damn word out of their mouth? Yet, if things start going south for the media, what are the narratives going to be like? How many people are going to go back to that idiot box and lose their collective minds because they're going to believe everything that the idiot box that told us to go get the shot and put on the mask and be little good boys and girls and Orange Man bad? Now they're going to give us the next version and we're going to listen to them about what's going on in the world's markets. I mean, how many times do we have to beat our head against the brick wall before we figure out we need to stop it? We got to look in and stop looking outward for answers to the problems in our lives. I'd just like to say we are going to have more resources and wealth and abundance than we could ever imagine. Worry less about the gold price of gold and silver and more about your heart, and everything else will take care of itself.
Well said. Very true. And thank you very much. And folks, all this, all these blessings and all this chains that are coming off us, restoring our sovereignty is just around the corner, folks. So hang in there. Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox, your closing comments of encouragement and inspiration for our viewers, sir.
I believe that with the wealth, as Rob said, comes a need for spirituality, which relates the heart to the pineal gland. And that's not something we have talked about. But the spirituality is the key. What is your frequency and vibration? How are you going to move up from the matrix into the next higher levels, the ascension process? If people take that money and they do with it what the typical winner of the lottery does, it will have no benefit on anybody. For me, I want to have a farm where I can teach children where I can teach people to work the farm, where I can then take that farm concept and move it to a second and a third farm, where I teach 50 to 70 kids from the time they're about 5 years old until they're probably graduating from high school. And I teach them the basic rudimentary things that I learned when I was a kid. And then we
Mhm.
have the people working the farm to teach the kids how to ride a horse, take care of a pig, take care of a goat, take care of a lamb, take care of the chickens, take care of the garden, the the 2 or 3 or 4 acre garden, and they eat all the food from the farm, and they learn what it is to be back to the roots and to their where their feet are walking on the ground, absorbing the energy that comes from the ground. And it's all about the spirituality that we take into that environment, because it's the spirit, not the riches. It's about the spirit. And my wife and I have been talking about this for quite a while. And it's very important that we have the spiritual guidance from, and not from a church, because the church doesn't matter. It's the inner workings of God within us, working with us, working on our heart, working on our brain, getting us to the place where we can take care of those children and take care of those employees that are working the farm. Have them all live together, work together, learn together, eat together, and then, as it's successful, to start a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth farm, where we take the people that we've trained in the first farm to the second farm and the third farm, and we teach the kids to ride a horse. All of those things are so important. But if we squander that money, and people will do it, then they're going to end up working on my farm in all likelihood,
Mhm.
if they're lucky. If they're lucky.
Mhm.
And we'll have teachers. We'll have school classrooms and everything for the children. And we're going to have
That's
music.
beautiful.
My wife is a singer, musician, and she's going
Nice.
to run that part of the school because that's important. You have to learn the arts. People don't understand
Absolutely.
how important the arts are, because the arts, the music, the drawing, all of those things are important. And so we have to do it right. Give them a chance to run on the outside, outdoors, not being hidden away like they are a lot today, not being sitting in
Hmm.
front of a computer all day, but
Yes.
working with their hands. And that's my vision of the future.
It's a beautiful vision, and it's certainly going to come to be sooner than we think. And you raised very important closing points for this broadcast. We are all ascending, and you spoke about frequency and vibration and energy. We all need to raise that. So those that are sitting and looking at the dark side of the battles we've been facing, and so forth and so on, remember faith, hope, and love. Remember hope, and not hopium, but hope, based on solid analysis and based on faith. And we have that. And that's what we try and do here at JMC Broadcasting by bringing these incredible guests on. So thank you both, gentlemen, very much for your service in the armed forces and your service in civilian life. God bless you both. Thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing you here and there as we do our monthly Global Defense Board panel. I can't thank you enough for being available to me and to our growing audience. So thank you both very much, and I'll be right back, folks.
Module 2 is the cornerstone of content in the Wealth Coach University. In this module, you will learn just how to goots, get out of the system, resulting in the confidence you need to protect and preserve your financial assets through this transition. This is the danger zone. The cost of inaction or wrong action may be the regret of a lifetime.
What an exciting time to be alive. The dawning of the golden age is upon us. Goots, Goots, get out of the system now. Action on your behalf is required. Be on the right side of history. Please visit all 10 free modules at wealthcoachuniversity.com and schedule your private one-on-one wealth coach consult with me, John Michael Chambers. I look forward to meeting with you. It's time. As I said at the beginning of the broadcast, chaos without direction, without solutions, is disruptive and will keep your vibrational level low. As we know, we want to raise that. We are ascending to what we were intended to be here in God's eyes. So having said that, I will close this broadcast out with just in the next 3 minutes with specific resources and specific action items for you to look at so that we take action. Action changes things. All right. So action item number 1, visit wealthcoachuniversity.com. wealthcoachuniversity.com. There are 10 free video modules there that walk you through how to get out of the system through this change. We will have collapses. We will have near-death experience, perhaps through the economy that Juan has talked about. We touched on the bond mess. We're not out of the danger zone yet. You can survive and thrive through this transition till all the riches come back and to the golden ages here. So Wealth Coach University, 10 free video modules. Please visit them. They speak about faith, preparedness, understanding precious metals, crypto, the Goots model itself. Visit wealthcoachuniversity.com. And also on wealthcoachuniversity.com, there are books and videos, very important information for you to learn more about the situation. All right. So because knowledge is power. Applied knowledge is wisdom. Second action item, jmcbroadcasting.com. Click on LOT, Library of Truth, at the navigation bar. And we're in an ongoing process of assembling videos for you, documentaries from all different individuals and producers. There's probably 100 of them up there right now, and they're broken down by category: economy, save the children, so many different things. But since this show is economics focused, go to the economic tab on Library of Truth and get empowered with truth there. Number 3, now getting into actually rolling your sleeves up and doing something now that you've got resources available. Brandon Clark, triadretire.com. You see it on the screen throughout the show. Give my friend Brandon Clark a call if you are looking for guaranteed income that you cannot outlive. If you have the retirement assets now, you've got to safeguard them. You've got to secure a guaranteed income if you're retired. And for those that are looking for alternative ways to get market exposure without the downside, I'm not an expert in this area. I know a thing or two. But you can contact Brandon Clark, who is a retirement planning specialist for those close to retirement and definitely those in retirement that are looking for alternatives to the market without the risk and mostly guaranteed income you can never outlive. There's an action item. Number 4, Bill Armour, my resource for gold and silver. Acquiring gold and silver, give Bill a call. He is Genesis Gold. You see that on the screen. Reach out to Bill Armour and get a free consultation, get into the right gold, the right silver, because they're not all created equally, but there is an action item and a solution. And by the way, many are in the camp that a collapse, not just the bond market, but the markets themselves are all coming down. If that occurs, you want to be out of harm's way. The time to make the move is now. We have extraordinary confidence. We have it happening. Be in gold and silver, physical, tangible. You can roll your 401ks, roll your IRAs, take your non-IRA money and get some or whatever percentage into these assets. And Bill Armour at Genesis Gold can help you. It's up on the screen for you to click on. Go to my website as well. And lastly, last action item for those that do have wealth. You've managed to survive everything that made sure you don't have wealth, but yet you did it. God's blessed you. You were wise. You were prudent. And now you've got to protect it through this final phase before we get into the golden age. I can assist those that have a lot going on. You can reach out to me by visiting wealthcoachuniversity.com. There's a mechanism to secure time to talk with me on a private Zoom room, just you and I on screen. Remember, I used to be a financial advisor. I'll put that old hat on. I can't give you advice and I can't sell any investments. I'm not in that business, but I can consult and coach from a lot of experience and introduce you to my resource network and fast track you to get out of the system. That's a Wealth Coach consult with me, your humble host, John Michael Chambers. Visit wealthcoachuniversity.com, and there are mechanisms to get you on my calendar. Limited time available, limited access, but I do several of these a month, and I really enjoy meeting with the folks, and they are very happy with the results of these consults by and large. So anyway, those are some action items for you. Remember, Rob Cunningham, get in the private Zoom room April 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Go to jmcbroadcasting.com, click on Premium Corp portal, sign up, and we look forward to seeing you on April 30th for 1 hour for Rob Cunningham, Captain Rob, to answer your questions. And join us next week for the Will and Bill Hour. Always educational. In fact, the last special broadcast we did, it was done on a Zoom. We didn't have a producer available. The amount of traffic that has come in to my world and to the world of Will and Bill has been extraordinary. You want to continue on this trajectory. They get into the weeds on everything that's happening. Join us next week, GFR, Will Barney, and Bill Armour. I want to thank my producers behind the scenes for pulling this show off and getting it done. We'll be back to our live starting next week, every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. But we got the content out there. That's the most important thing. I want to thank you all very much. I want to thank my two esteemed guests, Captain Rob Cunningham and retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox. Don't forget to join us on our Global Defense War military panel coming up at the end of this month. I'll just sign off. This is John Michael Chambers speaking with his voice. Speak with your voice and raise your vibrational level. The best is indeed yet to come. The Federal Reserve is no more a government agency than Federal Express. The Federal Reserve is a corporation founded and run by international bankers.
The Global Financial Reset is not just another podcast or episode of pertinent current discussions concerning economic-related issues. It's also an ongoing educational workshop series.
Join me and my prominent guests every Wednesday live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on JMC Broadcasting's backup Rumble channel on X, Facebook, and YouTube. Sign up for JMC's free weekly war report, including notifications of when the Global Financial Reset show is published. The future is bright, and it belongs to us, not to the global elite.
You can survive and thrive this reset transition, but it takes action on your behalf. The Global Financial Reset Workshop Series gives you the tools to get out of the system with confidence.